Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Bollywood Cinema Club, podcast where we take a look at Indian cinema every other week. I am the host of the Culture Cast, Chris Dashu, the show where this show spun off from. I am joined by my good friend. He is an Indian cinema fan, and he covers all kinds of film from all over the world over at his amazing podcast, the crown jewel of the Weirding Way Media Network, your friend and mine, podcast extraordinaire, Mike White.
Thank you so much, Chris, for having me. I really appreciate this.
Kamal Hassan fan club starter, Mike White. I don't know what it is. We in Indian Cinema Month this year, we did two or three Kamal Hassan movies, because we did Moondram Parai, and then Richard and I did Pushpaka Vimana, which is a silent movie that Kamal Hassan is in, and now this Sigappu Rojakkal, otherwise known as Kamal Hassan playing a weirdo once again.
Oh boy, big time weirdo.
Yeah, like in a way that almost makes Moondram Parai look pastoral. in a way. Oh my God. But yeah, on this episode of the Bollywood Cinema Club, we're going to be talking about the Tamil language film from 1978, Sigappu Rojakkal, which you can find on Prime Video for $2.
Might be able to find it other places too.
Oh, I watched it on Prime Video.
Oh, really? I watched it on YouTube.
Oh, well, good. Well, thank you. Thank you for also mentioning that. Because, yeah, realistically, most of these movies are on YouTube. It just remains to be seen if they have good English subtitles.
This had English subtitles.
Yes, the one I watched had English subtitles as well.
So we were talking yesterday about the whole thing with Indian people when they switch from English to whatever natural language they're speaking or dialect they're speaking. That's fine. No problem. But for some reason, I was having such a hard time watching this because the subtitles were not that great and just like slightly off. And so all of a sudden our characters would switch from Telugu to English and then back and then back and then back. And I'm just like, oh my God, what's going on? Because the English wasn't subtitled.
Yes, it sure wasn't, was it?
Yeah. So it's like, oh wait, he just said that in English. And then I have to like backtrack.
You didn't spend any money on this, and you had the exact same subtitles I did, apparently, which is... So don't spend $2 on Prime Video. You'll find the link to this movie in the podcast description on YouTube, because there is no need to pay for a bad version of this subtitled when you could get the same bad version subtitled for free. So the film is directed by Bharat Raja, and it does star Kamal Hassan and the superstar Sri Devi, who I have a greater appreciation for Sri Devi now, having watched some of the Netflix documentary, The Romantics, because she is the first female superstar of Indian cinema, to the point where she was working in Telugu and Tamil and Hindi films. So she was all over the place. This is the second time we've seen her now, actually, because she was in Moondram Parai opposite Kamal Hassan in that movie. In this movie, Kamal Hassan plays Dilip, a businessman who runs a business, but he's old Patrick Bateman, this one, and he likes to kill him and chase after him and murder him and have sex with him in a way that, once again, evokes a lot of other things that we've seen before. And Sri Devi plays a woman who meets our intrepid murderer, falls in love with him, and, well, as things tend to go awry in these kinds of stories, things go awry, I'd say. Mike, what did you think of Sigappu Rojakkal?
I really liked it. I had a really fun time with this. Whether it was intentionally fun or not, that's yet to be seen. The fashions are amazing. The use of music is wonderful, especially all of a sudden Rolls Royce starts playing with, and Car Wash comes up on the soundtrack. And I'm just like, what is going on? And then an entire murder scene set to a Donna Summer song. I'm all about it, man. This is fantastic. Yeah, gosh, what an unusual film. And there were so many things where, as I was watching it, I was just like, wow, I did not expect that shot. Or, oh, that's a very interesting way that they presented that. There's some really cool direction in this movie. And is it ham-handed? Yeah. Is it super melodramatic? Yeah, I really like that about this film. So I had a fun time watching this one.
You mentioned the music already. Correct me if I'm wrong, but did they not use like the music cue from The Godfather?
Oh, all the time. His watch.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's Nina Rhoda's love theme from The Godfather,
Yes,
right?
yeah.
Okay, I'm just making sure, like,
Yep.
like, and look, my favorite movie is Goodfellas. And if somebody asks me, it's Goodfellas or Freaked, depending on the audience and whether or not I think somebody's going to know one, because everybody knows Goodfellas. But Goodfellas is great. The Godfather is great, too. And it's so weird to hear that thing in this, just like constantly reoccurring. Yeah. Every time he opens his watch, it plays the little, and it's just like, okay, like, again, it doesn't not work, but it's so specifically from one thing.
Yeah.
Like every other time it's done, or if it's used any other way, it's used as kind of in parody to that. So all of that aside, the weirdness of using the Godfather's love theme in your film, this movie's really interesting. It's billing itself, I think, as like a psychological thriller, and I think that's the best way to classify it. But it's also, in a lot of ways, like a slice of life story, because the character of Dilip is rather well adjusted when he's not killing people, and the interactions he has with Sridevi, who plays Sarada, are pretty cute. I mean, they're a very good couple in this movie, just like they were in Moondram Parai. But again, the thing that works here, just like in Moondram Parai, is you know that there is something else going on.
Right.
And she doesn't. This time, it's kind of like Moondram Parai. The conceit is she doesn't know what's going on in that movie, and she doesn't know what's going on in this movie.
Yeah, and is a creep in both.
Right? I mean, look, here's the thing. Kamal Hassan is an actor who I have seen now 3 times. Mentioned Moondram Parai, mentioned Pushpaka Vimana, and now Sigappu Rojakkal. And all 3 characters are, I get, very similar. Like, you haven't seen Pushpaka Vimana, but you did see Moondram Parai. And this character and the character in Moondram Parai could be brothers, if not mirror images of one another, or like a slight perversion of one another in a lot of ways. Like one character is willing to do when the other isn't.
Out of the light a little bit.
Pretty much, right? Like, I'm again, like, Kamal Hassan has a charisma about him that really works. And it's surprising because, again, with a lot of these actors in Indian cinema that are this charismatic, they're not often playing these kind of complex roles.
Right.
They're more playing like, oh, he's just a good guy and he's a great person and you want to cheer for him. Like, I had seen things when I was reading that his character of Dilip in this movie is a anti-hero, and it's interesting that's the take. I don't know how I feel about that.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of, like your Deadpool, he killed a lot of people, but they all deserve it. I don't think any of the people that get killed in this movie deserve it at all.
Right. He's not like righting a societal wrong or doing he's killing women because of what happened to him when he was a kid.
Yeah.
Again, like that, Norman Bates, tale as old as time type.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I even wrote in my notes that there's very much the Psycho reveal at the end of this. Like when Simon Oakland comes to the audience at the end of Psycho, basically the brother and the lover, or the sister and the lover, are his audience. And he just starts telling, well, Norman had this thing. I mean, that happens in this movie at the end of this, right before they reveal. And you're going to have to help me with the end of this once we get to it, because we start off with him with Dilip in this psycho ward / jail, and he's there to visit his father every year. And he comes in, and as you're watching it, you're just like, something's not right here. But then the movie kind of continues, and you don't really realize that it's a framing device. At least I didn't until they come back to it at the end. I thought it was just the natural progression of he's in this jail. He visits his father every single year. He leaves. You feel that something's not right. And then the movie starts, and then we get to see, okay, he's this businessman, and he's got this really creepy sex perv office manager guy.
Gundamani. He's a bigger creep than Kamal Hassan is. I mean, oftentimes in these scenarios, when they play out in real life, the enablers often tend to look worse than even the people committing the crimes, because the enablers don't get punished.
Yes.
Ghislaine Maxwell or whatever the hell her name is an outlier. Most of those people don't get punished for doing essentially what this guy is doing because he knows what happens to these women. He's complicit.
Oh, he knows this? I thought he was just so lecherous about stuff. I didn't realize that he knew that his boss was going to kill this woman.
I mean, it kind of feels like he knows because when the woman's brother comes in, when Chitra's brother comes in,
right,
he's like, oh, she doesn't work here anymore and she didn't come in. And it's like, it felt like he was covering for his boss.
Oh, I didn't pick that up. I picked up him just like, oh, that stupid lady, she doesn't even come here anymore. But I kind of like where you're making him more like this Renfield character.
Right. Well, I mean, again, like every monster needs kind of his sidekick if you have this kind of setup where you're just coaxing people in on false pretenses. Like it's easier if you have someone else. And he does have other people because he has his, like monstrous human beings at his house that are, fucking God, these like ghouls of human beings who are watching his videos of him murdering women. And you know what? It's not the level of Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer, but it's doing the same thing. It's trying to evoke that same reaction, that feeling that you get of just like being chilled to your core by this character who can present so normal, but then is a sociopath, a complete psychopath. Yeah. And look, I mean, this movie came out in 1978, so we're what, a couple years removed from Bundy? Like, I mean, this is Bundy era, so like this is a perfect kind of story to tell in this day and age. And look, it's like India didn't have their own serial killers. I mean, this is based a little bit on Raman Raghav, who went on a killing spree and was labeled the Jack the Ripper of India. So again, like Netflix has all these documentaries now about serial killers in India. I don't know if you know about that.
No.
Yeah, Netflix has a series that is devoted almost directly to Indian true crime and serial killers.
That's so funny. I'm going to have to tell my coworker that recommends a lot of these films to me. She's totally in true crime stuff. So maybe this is like two great tastes that go great together.
Well, I mean, that's the thing about this movie is it almost feels kind of docudrama-esque. I mean, the way it's filmed, it's not that it's not a stylistically interesting movie, but most of the movie is filmed very, I'm not going to say cinema verite, but very stylistically devoid. He's just walking around. He's just doing things like,
But there are those flourishes that I brought up at the beginning, like when he's in the sari shop and scoping out, because he's still scoping out the girl that is applying for the job, the one that he ends up murdering, correct?
Yeah, Chitra, yeah.
She's there, and then our main woman is there as well. And where the hell was I going with this? Oh, in the sari shop, you see him and her talking, and then she moves out of the picture, and the way he starts to move, the camera pulls back, and you realize that the whole thing was being shot in a mirror. And I really liked that. I thought it was a really nice touch. And there's a couple other times throughout the movie where I was just like, oh, okay, they're trying something different here. I kind of agree with you as far as like, there's not big set pieces necessarily other than the end. It is very much a day in the life of this guy, or a week in the life, or however long this whole courtship stuff goes on for as well. But yeah, this is pretty much, and he, until the end of the film, he pretty much is the star of the show. I don't think there's too many scenes without him in it.
No, and that's, again, like, the last time when we talked about a Kamal Hassan movie, when we talked about Moondram Pirai, it was also his movie in a lot of ways. Like he was the main character there, but I think here he's a much more interesting character on the screen. Like, again, the character in Moondram Pirai is a lot of ways like kind of a cipher. The main focus of that movie is Sri Devi's character, less him. In this movie, he is the focus. And so, like you said, we follow him throughout most of the movie. And we get to see these kind of shots from his point of view sometimes. And again, like you said, there are some interesting things that they do, but this is in a lot of ways just a perverse romance. They're taking the romantic kind of drama that you're expecting and they're perverting it in an interesting way. And I think it really works. I just don't think he's an anti-hero because that's so strange to me. But like I saw it a couple times. So he's not painted very, it's not ambiguous that he's evil. He's evil. He's just
Right.
very good at covering it up.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean he's not evil, though.
No, and they clue you in pretty early on that he's not a good guy. I mean, it is interesting that they do have that office manager that we see first, and you're just like, oh my God, this guy's a piece of shit. And then you meet, our main character, and it's like, oh, okay, well, he seems nice. And that's like, but no, he's actually worse because he's this terrible monster. Yeah. And this whole thing of like, I mean, there's a lot of eroticism to this movie. I mean, that this guy is basically a sex killer, but it's so interesting the way that eroticism is portrayed or not portrayed in Indian films. And I've always been fascinated by this because years and years ago, I watched the Indian version of Brian De Palma's Body Double. And, the whole thing with Holly Body and her dance and all that stuff, that they had to have the actress completely clothed, but the guy was just like so enamored by her. And it's like, it goes from lust to love so
Right.
quickly, because it's just like, rather than, oh, and then here's this big scene where they have sex. It's like, oh, here's this big scene and they hug. And I'm like, all right. But yeah, I love the way that it's just like so chaste, but then at the same time that he is this vicious murderer. But there are times where you get that sense of violence. It feels like they were really pretty edgy with this film.
Well, and I'm really shocked that we have scenes of the camera footage of him murdering.
Yeah.
I mean, again, it's not graphic in the way you would expect it to be, but it is grotesque because it's not like there's blood splattering everywhere, all over the walls, all over the camera. It's just violent out of nowhere. And they do kind of an interesting thing where it kind of like, it starts feeling like the footage starts ramping itself up the way it's being presented to you. And the music kind of ramps up with what's going on. And it just gives you a really interesting kind of inner look at the mind of this character who just kind of, you see it in the scene towards the end of the movie where he's sitting there talking to this policeman who approaches him in the bathroom.
Right.
And the audio drops out, the talking drops out, and he can't. I'm assuming that that's just trying to get into the mindset of this character, and he's just unable to listen to anything, and he just goes apeshit.
Oh, that's a really good point. Yeah.
And he kills that cop, right? But they keep doing this stylistic thing where the audio drops away, at least the dialogue drops away, and it's just the music playing. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because those scenes give you an idea of kind of what this character is dealing with in his head, but at the same time, he is such a terrible character as just a human being that by the end of it, you wish he had gotten more of a comeuppance, is what it feels like, right?
Yeah. Yeah. He really should have died, but it should have been more painful. I mean, I'm always fascinated too. Sorry to keep yammering on, but the whole idea of the person who impales themselves by accident in order to keep the main character's hands blood free. I always appreciate that in movies. And it's kind of a whoops, I fell and got a cross through the chest in this one.
Right.
But he's okay. Don't worry, folks. He's all right. He's going to go to the mental institution. So tell me, Chris, kind of because we're right here by the end of the movie, there's him looking like almost comatose and like staring at the camera. And then we cut, and then it's the beginning scene again. So I'm like, all right, this is him. This is from the beginning of the movie. Like, I'm thinking, is this at the end of the movie? Is this the beginning of the movie? Is this actually like what we saw was his whole fantasy? And like he pretends that he's visiting the mental institution, even though he's actually locked up there. And it's the guard was just humoring him the whole time. Just like, oh yeah, that's great. Yeah, no, we'll see you next year. Like, I don't know what was happening here.
Interesting. I hadn't thought of it that way. Interesting. I mean, it adds a different layer to this movie.
Mm-hmm.
Because it does kind of bring back to light the weirdness of the opening scene.
Right.
Because that first scene is strange.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, it is strange. Like the way he's treated when he's in the prison. I mean, look, does the film benefit from it being told in that weird kind of, it's all a dream, but not really thing? Like, I don't know if the movie's better or worse for it.
Yeah.
If that were to be the case. But I think what's interesting is it does do something to kind of show that there may be something. Because that final scene of him just staring out into space,
Right.
is really, really arresting. I mean, he is just the look on Kamal Hassan's face. He looks nothing like the character you've seen this entire movie either. He's pretty much unrecognizable. He has short hair. He has short facial hair. Like, he looks very different from the character we've been following, wearing his bell-bottom pants and leather jacket. So,
oh my God, the outfits in this movie
are wild, man.
Oh wow! I don't know if you saw. I posted on my Facebook that the scene in the Cyrus shop when it's all those bright colors behind him, and he's wearing that plaid jacket. That's just like, oh my God! It's like, do not trust this man.
If this man is telling you about style tips, run away. Well, and what's really funny is, I mean, it feels so of the time, like in a lot of ways, right? Like 78, the way he's dressed, he just looks so much like he looks the part of the kind of like a creep in the late 70s. Like just the way he dresses, the way he acts. But again, like I can completely see why Sri Devi's character falls for him, because he's quiet.
Yeah.
I mean, like ultimately he is just kind of a quiet guy. You know, in something like American Psycho, which I brought up at the beginning of this show, I kind of have a hard time understanding why anybody likes Patrick Bateman, because he's just like so unlikable as a character. And it's like, no, the only way this works is if everybody else is as unlikable as he is, which is exactly what Bret Easton Ellis does in the book, is everybody's just a complete conceited yuppie piece of shit. And that's the only way that really works. Here, he could never have been a Bateman-esque character. He had to be more of a Norman Bates character, because otherwise it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. And Sri Devi's character would not, I think, believably have been able to fall in love with and be, again, taken in by, because that's ultimately what it is. She's taken in by him because she is not able to tell what is his deal. And similarly to Moondram Pillai, she is kind of, I don't know, like, oblivious.
She's an innocent,
naive, like overly naive.
Yeah, I feel bad for her. I mean, she's such a good girl, and like that she won't just jump into bed with them, and that she has to go through the whole courting process and all this. I'm like, okay, and it almost feels like maybe he's gonna change his ways for a little bit,
right?
Yeah, like, oh, he'll be renewed by this very pure woman, but no, that's not the case. Sorry.
No, not even remotely. I mean, so what's really interesting about her in this movie versus something like Moondram Pillai is, in a lot of ways, she's playing a similar character. Again, a character who does not have all the pieces of information to be able to make the correct decision. But I think I like this performance just as much as the Moondram Pillai one. At least this one doesn't have that laugh.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, I liked her better in this, and I think it might have just been the laugh, but I don't think it was just that.
The laugh was pretty bad.
Yeah. But I like that, she's our investigator and eventually kind of starts to figure stuff out. But then we get a shot of a hand in a garden pretty early in that whole sequence, and she doesn't react as strongly as I think that she should.
To a hand in the rose bush? Yeah.
Yeah.
I do like that little kind of conceit of where he's burying the bodies. I mean,
oh yeah,
I feel like it's very, this movie feels not Shakespearean, but it has that kind of grandiosity to it, where it's like he's burying the bodies under the rose bush, and then
like
he puts
Gothic romance.
Yeah, and then he puts a flower in his pocket, and it's from the rose bushes of the dead women. Like, oh my God, it's so Gothic. It's just so, I really appreciate that this movie blends the sensibilities of that with Indian cinema, because this movie, we have a scene where Kamal Hassan, a murderer, is singing and dancing. Yes, it is I guess it's a dream sequence, but like in Mahakal, the movie that Heather and I watched, that's the Indian cinema version of Nightmare on Elm Street, the monster doesn't sing in that movie. And Heather and I contended that the movie would have been better if they had used music to kind of give the monster some characterization. And here, it's not really used that way, but it's used in a way that doesn't feel like, oh, I'm supposed to now get into this song that a woman murderer is singing and dancing.
Right. Yeah, the times that the songs come up the most seem to be those times where you're like, oh, he can change. He can be a different person.
Right. Or when randomly the Godfather's music starts playing.
or Car Wash, or I Feel Love.
Yeah, like I think I Feel Love might have been the most surprising thing.
Yeah. Well, and like I said before, I thought it was pretty effective. And you mentioned the whole thing where like everything cuts out when he's killing that waiter guy in the restroom as well. It's like I was surprised by how stylish that was.
Yeah. I really like the parts of this movie where it's Kamal Hassan's character kind of doing his thing. Because again, it's just not something we've really seen in Indian cinema. This movie would inspire so many other, including a remake of this movie in 1980. But yeah, there were a couple.
A remake by the same director.
Yeah, but isn't that Moondram Parai?
Yeah, I mean, but it's funny, just like that he directed this one, but in Hindi. And I found that one out on archive.org, but there's no subtitles. But I like flipped through it. It's still The Godfather on the pocket watch.
Oh man, that's amazing.
Why change it?
I mean, yeah, really. But this movie also ushered in like Tamil films that had, psycho killers, to quote David Byrne. But the weirdest thing, and this was something that you had mentioned to me and then I went and looked into, was that they were going to make a sequel to this movie. And it was going to be the director's son, Manoj, making a sequel to this movie with Sri Devi and possibly Kamal Hassan as well in like 2014, which is kind of nuts.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I've seen the Indian version of Silence of the Lambs. I know how you do this with serial killers in movies, but it feels wrong now. It feels like it'd be really to have this killer. I don't know.
I think this kind of story was very of a time and of a place. And I think that this kind of like story maybe has been done to death at this point. Mm-hmm. The sexually frustrated sexual killer. Like, again, not that it's not entertaining, because it is. Not that it hasn't worked, because it has. But it's just, I'm not going to say you've seen them one, you've seen them all, but in a lot of ways, kind of like Psycho. If you've seen Psycho, you've kind of seen this movie.
Yeah.
And that's not a knock at this movie or at Psycho, but this kind of movie, this genre of film tends to follow very similar tropes and it has a similar kind of direction that it's going. And this movie more or less does exactly that, including what, like you mentioned, replicating the ending of Psycho down to we're going to explain what was going on with our hero, quote unquote. But I think here what makes it interesting is everything that Indian cinema injects into it. The weird style of the shots that they're using, the music, and then the fashion all feel, and obviously the setting, but it all feels uniquely Indian cinema. And that really sets it apart in an interesting way.
Yeah. Yeah. I was fascinated by this. And I just kept thinking, where are they going to go? How far can they take this? How far do they want to take this? And yeah, just seeing it from this perspective, like that they have this thing where they're at a temple and she wants to buy a statue of a god, and she picks one and he's just like, oh no, that's so cheap. Let me buy this more expensive one. She's like, no, this one's fine. And then that God statue seems to inspire her later on when she's being chased around the house by the really creepy manservant and the horrible father figure. And oh my God, that flashback sequence, especially when we get to his quote unquote mother and father, the second set, the real creep father. Oh my God, that was something.
Yeah. Again, we don't get that in Psycho. We don't, and in a lot of these movies, we don't ever get those scenes. We hear about them in expository dialogue because, again, Simon Oakland, just lays it all out for us
right
at the end of that movie. Like, it was actually really nice to see the scene, and that feels oddly less conservative than I was expecting from this movie.
So you don't see the father murder the mother, right?
Yeah, and it's again not presented in a gory or over the top.
Right. Yeah, it felt like she just disappeared, and so did the lover.
Well, and I mean, that's the other thing. I mean, Chitra, the woman that also worked at the sari shop with Sarada, she just disappears.
Yeah.
just, one moment her brother's looking for, and you're like, oh, she's gone.
Right.
She's gone now, I guess. Like,
yeah, it's like magic.
Yeah, which I mean, I actually I appreciate that kind of storytelling device of just, that is Henry Portrait of the Serial Killer. Like, somebody gets in the car with him, and then the next scene, he has their lighter in his pocket. Like, and it's like the less that's said about it, the better, because whatever you're thinking happened is probably way worse than what actually happened.
Yeah.
Like, and that's an effective storytelling device that really works in this film's favor, because again, I was surprised the scenes that we do get, because there is a level of conservatism that I expect from Indian cinema, even if it is South India, which South Indian cinema seems to be a little bit more transgressive, which I appreciate. Like, Moondram Parai felt very transgressive in a lot of ways.
It did, yeah.
But again, in a way that helps push cinema as a whole, especially Indian cinema, kind of in an interesting direction, because Sri Devi, I mean, again, she is a star of a magnitude that, again, most Westerners cannot comprehend. And again, we have this conversation every time we do this show about how Indian actors are perceived in India and how they're venerated like gods. Sri Devi was a Indian actress who worked in all of the cinema of India. And when she would go on to work with people like Yash Chopra, that was a big deal because she was going to work in Hindi film. But here is where she's showing the rest of cinema in India what she can do, because it's her and Kamal Hassan in this, her and Kamal Hassan in Moondram Parai. And then she starts starring in other Indian language films throughout India. But this is kind of the early on moments of her career and kind of setting herself up to be, again, later in her career, seen as the first female superstar of Indian cinema, which is a big deal.
Oh, yeah. 283 credits to her name. I think the only thing that made her stop working was that she passed away in 2018.
Which is a shame.
Yeah.
Because in the Romantics documentary on Netflix, she is sorely missed, because they talk a lot about her. And they talk a lot about her films in, again, more or less in, in the Yash Raj film kind of camp. But they do mention about why she worked with him, because, again, she was a massive star in South Indian cinema. So, again, that's why I go out of my way on the show to make sure it's clear to everybody, Indian cinema is not just Bollywood. So her cutting her bones and cutting her teeth on South Indian cinema with someone like Kamal Hassan allows her to then go and work with other people in these other areas that, again, would continue to elevate her visibility. And you mentioned she passed away. She accidentally drowned, which is like fucking terrible. Because, again, she is, if you listen to the people in that documentary and you see her in this movie and in Moondram Parai, she commands your attention when she's on screen, regardless of what she's doing. She's fantastic.
Yeah, she's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I like her a lot. And again, I tend to not focus on one kind of cinema when it comes to Indian cinema, because I like to see South Indian and Bollywood. But for whatever reason, South Indian cinema is just, it seems to resonate with me in a way that feels not more exciting, but it feels like the chances that they were taking resonate with me personally more. Because, I mean, this film feels very, again, transgressive. Like, it's just so strange. And it's such a interesting subject material that I don't think they were tackling this in Bollywood cinema in 78. They were doing more like Amitabh stuff, because that's when Amitabh was kind of coming up in the industry and becoming the, quote, angry young man of Indian cinema, to the point where he's the one man, what I think they called him, like a one-man cinema's production world, like, or something to that effect. But, I mean, South Indian cinema just feels more kind of, and not interesting, but willing to take some chances that feel less in line with what you're expecting from Indian cinema of the time.
Yeah, it almost feels like that feeling you get when you watch the documentary about exploitation, where it's just like they were edgy and they were taking a lot of chances. It feels like these were the bad boys compared to, like, oh, the guys up, in Bollywood, they do their thing. Us Tollywood guys, we're going to do the real stuff.
Right. And I appreciate that about these movies, because, again, the last movie I talked about with Kamal Hassan was an Indian silent film, and it was like the only one. Like, there's not very many that exist outside of when they were originally made.
Right.
But Kamal Hassan is in it, and Kamal Hassan is in this, and then Kamal Hassan is in Moondram Parai, a movie which its subject material is very unpalatable. But again, like by tackling these interesting subject materials and these topics that, again, I don't feel like we're being confronted in other parts of Indian cinema, it really elevates, I think, everybody, because it just, in my mind, it shows like we're willing to have more interesting conversations and talk about less mainstream ideas in a way that maybe brings attention to them. And I again, like, I don't know what attention they needed to bring to here other than, you know, women are being taken advantage of by terrible men. But hey, it's an interesting story, at least. It's an entertaining story. I don't know if there's any educational value to be gleaned from it, but it is entertaining, and it is very much not what I, even when you, because you mentioned this movie to me last time we recorded, and like it didn't sound like the kind of movie that would make sense in Indian cinema.
Right. Yeah. That's why when I saw it, and I don't even remember what caught my eye, but I was just like, oh, wow, this looks different.
Right. It was probably Kamal Hassan, because we had just watched the Kamal Hassan movie.
It was probably like You May Also Like on Amazon. It was probably trying to see what other ones of his are available for free on Prime.
Right. Well, I think the other thing that I did really appreciate about this movie is there's a scene where they use a lot of lighting, and you mentioned the God statue at one point, and they do this interesting thing on the God statue where the lighting is kind of oscillating, and it's kind of showing one side of the face and the other side of the face. And there's a scene that it matches up with in the movie where you see Kamal Hassan with the red and the blue on his face kind of, you know, half and half. And it was like an interesting callback, because again, like, it's just the things that they do when they do them are interesting. I just think injecting those kind of stylistic choices into a slice of life story makes this a lot more interesting than Moondram Pariah. I actually was much more entertained by this movie than I was by Moondram.
I think I was too. I definitely think I was. And yeah, like you're talking about stylistic stuff. The moment in the disco with the woman that's dancing, and I kept thinking, is that the woman that was dead? Is this kind of like, again, like a flashback type of thing? But I really like the way that they don't show her face, and it was so much just the body and the silhouette as she was dancing, and then we just kept getting closer and closer to her as we've got him watching. And I was reminded too of like Giallo films, just because it might be because he had to put on black gloves before he killed somebody, but I was just like, yeah, there's some elements here of like a Giallo.
Yeah, when he kills the cop in the bathroom, he like, I love that they take that shot and they show it of like him pulling his gloves out of his back pocket.
Yeah.
I'm like, it's again, like, it's so good. And I haven't seen any other films from the director Bharan Thirdaraja. So I wanted to watch Red Rose. I came to the same realization that you did, which is I couldn't find a English subbed version of it, which that feels like a really shitty way to not be able to find a movie and watch it. But again, I get it. This is not the first time, the last time we've dealt with this. I mean, at least it's not like when we did China Gate, which was, you know, halfway impossible to find. So at least this movie exists somewhere. But he's still working, still making movies as recently as last year. Wow. So yeah, with Thiruchi Trambalam, which is a romantic comedy. So, and that's the thing, like, I honestly don't, South Indian cinema is just, it's its own thing. I'm not saying I don't know a lot about it, but it is so much its own thing that it's a whole nother world you have to immerse yourself into, with their own stars and their own people that are venerated, like Rajnikant, like Chiranjeevi, like Kamal Hassan, like Sri Devi. Those are all actors that are venerated because of their work in South Indian cinema. Because I don't know how much Bollywood films Rajnikant does. I would wager a guess it's less than the Tamil films that he did. Because as far as I'm concerned, Rajnikant is a South Indian superstar, not a Bollywood superstar.
Right.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Have some. What else? Is there anything else you want to talk about?
No, I'm just really glad that you agreed to do this one. It was different, and yeah, I think I like that it went farther than Moondram Pariah, and I like I said, I was willing to watch the Hindi remake. I really wanted to find subs, but those were impossible to find. But yeah, I'm definitely interested in seeing more of this filmmaker and Kamal Hassan and Sridevi's work. I mean, did all three of them work together many times, or? Was this just kind of a few things?
I mean, again, Kamal Hassan was a really big South Indian star around the same time that Sri Devi was. So it would probably stand the reason they worked together more. Again, I don't have the list in front of me, but I mean, someone like Salman Khan and Katrina Kaif have worked together like 5 times in recent memory. SRK and Kajol have worked together God knows how many times at this point. So I wouldn't be surprised if they worked together multiple times. Because again, I mean, Moondram Pariah is kind of what put Kamal Hassan on the map. And that was obviously opposite Sri Devi. So it would stand to reason that, I mean, remember that they were in that sequel together or requel or remake of Sadma. Wasn't Sadma just Moondram Pariah, the Hindi version of it?
Yeah.
So, and they were both in that together. So it would probably stand to reason they work together a lot. And they have great chemistry too. That's the thing, Kamal Hassan is an interesting actor. He has an interesting look, but he has an undeniable charisma about him. And, again, I hate to compare Indian actors to American actors because it feels unfair to the Indian actors. But if we were to compare the energy that Kamal Hassan has, what American actor would be a close analog in your opinion? Because I kind of have my own thoughts, but I'm curious now that you and I have seen 2 of these movies with Kamal Hassan. Is there anyone that kind of has similar energy in American cinema?
I hate where my mind went, but I went to Steve Buscemi for some reason. I don't know if it's just the looks or what.
I was going to say someone like someone like, not like a De Niro, but maybe like a Pacino.
I can see that.
Like a quiet, like that whole quiet thing that Pacino does, the stare and kind of just
used to do.
Yeah.
Until he had to scream all the time.
Yeah, I know. I mean, Pacino pre-Dunkachino, Al Pacino.
Yeah.
But that kind of like quiet intensity. Because that's the thing. I mean, Kamal Hassan, the characters that he's played in the 2 movies that you and I have seen him in, and then the 3rd movie that I saw with Richard, he is very understated. But his understatedness is what works because not that I couldn't believe him being this big, bombastic person, but he doesn't need to be convincing and charismatic. And it totally works in Moondram Pariah to the point where his relationship with Sri Devi isn't as off-putting as it would have been otherwise. In this movie, he is a lot more, I think, relatable of a character because of how quiet the intensity is. And he's not, hey, Paul. He's not doing any of that nonsense. And in Pushpaka Vimana, again, obviously dialogue-free movie, but he has this quiet intensity there too. So I like him a lot. He has a very different energy than someone like Amitabh or SRK. I wonder if Kamal Hassan is kind of always the same in a lot of his movies, because the 3 movies I've seen all kind of feel very in the same vein of one another in terms of his performance. So I wonder if we were to watch another Kamal Hassan movie that's not a Sri Devi film, that's maybe more of a contemporary film, it would be interesting to see kind of where his career progressed and where he would go as an actor. Because again, having seen these 3 movies, they all feel like you could triple bill these movies. And I think by the end of it, you'd be like, I can see the through line here as to why you picked these 3 movies to watch together.
Mm-hmm. He's in one called Tick, Tick, Tick. That looks interesting, where he is a fashion photographer who gets embroiled in a series of grisly murders.
I mean, I'm game. I'm there for any of this. You don't even have to pitch any of this that hard to me. You just say it's a movie that looks interesting. I'm like, yeah, I'm here. Like, let's do it.
Cool.
That's the thing. I'm always game because I don't. It's not that I don't know enough about Indian cinema, but I don't know as much as I want to know. And the only way to know more is to either do the research or watch the movies or both. And I'm not going to sit here and read all about these movies and not watch them because, boy, sitting and watching that Romantics documentary, it's like, oh, I've got like 300 movies now I need to watch.
Yeah. I heard it will add a lot to your watch list. Yeah.
Yeah. And like some of the things I've seen already. So that's good. But I'm really hoping that somebody does. And again, I would love to be involved in some way. And that's a fucking pie in the sky dream. But I would love if somebody would do an Indian cinema documentary or docu-series the way all these genre films in American cinema get, their massive 5 hours and then 5 hours and then 5 hours like that horror documentary series did, where it's like, just beat me over the head with it. But I want that for Indian cinema. Because again, the thing on Netflix is a tad myopic because it's about one production house and it's made by that production house. I'm not complaining, but again, like there's a lot more going on. I appreciate that that's very much the expectation with Indian cinema, and Yash Raj Films kind of fulfills those expectations for the Indian viewers and for Westerners who are watching those movies, because that's where our expectation of what the movies are kind of came from, with the beautiful colors and the singing and the dancing and the kind of bombastic over-the-top performances. That's like a Yash Raj film thing. So I would love to see one that has, Kamal Hassan and Rajnikant and talks about South India or Kollywood even. Again, Kollywood, something I'm even less familiar with. And I'm not even sure I've seen a Kollywood. So
I don't know if I have, no.
So, I mean, again, like there's so much and so many places to go. I mean, they mention it in the Netflix documentary. India makes 700 to 800 films a year.
Oof,
That's so many. Like,
oh yeah.
I don't know how many we make in the United States, but it's not that many. It can't be, right? Like,
no, I mean, I don't know, even at the height of the studio system, how many movies we're making a year.
I don't feel like 800 is a number that was approachable.
No.
And I mean, again, like you mentioned, I mean, go and look at a lot of these actors' credits. They have, how much did you say Sri Devi had? Like
283.
That's like puts James Hong to shame.
Yes.
James Hong has 100 film credits. Hold my beer, pal.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
Again, like in American cinema, I totally get it. But in Indian cinema, it's like cinema is life. Like it is in a lot of ways the lifeblood of the country. And when one of your massive forms of entertainment is in the media is film, to the point where it's an event, there are going to be a lot of movies. And there are a lot of people in India, and a lot of people need to be entertained. And a lot of people have all kinds of beliefs and things that they want. And 700 to 800 movies a year seems like enough to maybe satiate the need for entertainment. But yeah, I would love to see something more kind of holistically Indian cinema. Because again, as someone who is kind of throwing themselves into this head first, I have some blind spots within Indian cinema that I'm trying to kind of deal with, like Kollywood. So
that
final,
would be nice.
So final, go ahead.
Not only would I like that, 5 hours on this, 5 hours on that, but I would love it if, like you were saying, we just here's comedies. And comedies could probably be subdivided into so many. It's like right now they're celebrating screwball comedies on TCM. I mean, that's one brand of comedy. What kind of weird subgenre comedies do they have in India? So far, I haven't seen anything that is just straight comedy.
Right.
Maybe PK, but even that, I'm not sure. But
PK maybe, but remember that scene in PK where that people get blown up by terrorists? Remember that?
Yeah.
I actually think if I were to sit here and think what's the closest I've seen to a comedy in Indian cinema, it's either PK or Three Idiots. But even Three Idiots felt more dramedy, less straight comedy. I haven't seen a straight comedy yet.
Yeah.
But that's a good transition into the next thing that you and I are talking about, Mike. Because at some point in the near future, you're going to hear Mike and I talk about Asaya Pirai. Jesus Christ. I always fuck the second word up. Okay. We're going to be talking about Asaya Piravi, which features one of my favorite Indian actors. And I know one that has definitely taken your heart by storm. The one and only superstar Rajnikant. That shit's just stuck in my head permanently.
You're welcome.
Him and Triptych will never get old. Him singing to himself 3 times. And look, I think for me, my heart will always belong to Rajnikant because he was, that was the first Indian cinema film I saw was Entourage. And I saw it on the flight to India, so I can't remove those two things from one another. And this movie that we're going to be watching the next time you and I do one of these episodes is also where the little superstar, I guess is what the meme is. But if you were around in the late 2000s, you would have seen a clip of a little Indian dwarf actor, midget actor, diminutive actor dancing in front of Rajnikant on the table. That's where this comes from. So probably a lot of people have seen this clip and don't know what it's from, myself included. So it was just weird
to see the 108 minutes before it and the 240 minutes afterwards.
Right? Honest to God, boy, isn't that the truth? I mean, the funny thing is I saw this clip when I was in high school and it was for a band that I liked and they put their music in the spot where the music from the clip was. And I can't unthink about that now because we're going to be talking about that movie, and it features, again, Rajnikant, who he's just like, looks like the nicest guy, just like the most, I'm super excited to talk about that with you, Mike. And thank you so much for bringing Sigappu Rojakkal to the table, because this was a fun, strange, interesting movie.
Yeah. Let's keep it going, man. Yeah. Let's get some more fun and strange stuff going.
So when you're not here talking Indian cinema with me, Mike, where could people find what you do?
You can find, well, obviously, if you're listening to this show, you know where all the good stuff is at over at weirdandwaymedia.com, where you can also find some shows that I work on, including The Projection Booth, or you can get it at projectionboothpodcast.com. But why go there when you're already at weirdandwaymedia.com?
He said it. I don't have to. This show, BollywoodCinemaClub.com, social media if you're interested, but that shit's a drag. We all know it. Let's just be honest about it. As for this show on iTunes, like, rate, and review wherever you get it, but more than likely iTunes. It helps us find our audience, and it helps our audience help other people find Indian cinema. And we're on the cusp, folks. 2 years from now, maybe even a year from now, we're going to have been ahead of this. I promise you that. I can almost guarantee it.
Because you can get in on the ground level and then tell two friends, and they'll tell two friends, and they'll tell two friends, and we'll all be watching Indian cinema.
And we don't even have to have a pyramid scheme.
No.
I mean, it sounds like one. It's an upside down triangle.
That's right.
And as always, thank you, Mike, for joining me. It's a lot of fun. Hey, you know, the two of us getting a podcast together, I don't think either one of us are ever going to complain. So,
well, I always appreciate the invite, sir.
And we'll catch you on the next episode.